Economists talk about information as a public good. Everybody in our society benefits if there is good monitoring. There's good monitoring of how money is spent. But unfortunately, in most countries, there aren't good public mechanisms for doing the monitoring. And that's one of the important functions of investigative reporting. It's really kind of performing a public function, a public accountability function. I talked about the public sector, but it's also true for the private sector. The private sector plays a very important role in most countries in development. But the private sector often is engaged in exploitive activities. It every time there's a bribe, there's a bribee. There's a briber, and the private sector is almost always involved in corruption. Poor people in developing countries have few options. That makes them particularly vulnerable to exploitation. And investigative reporting plays a very important role in making sure that when that kind of exploitation occurs, it's uncovered. And the very fact that there are investigative reporters out there discourages this kind of activity from occurring. So it actually acts as a deterrent. So it's not measured, the success of investigative reporting is not measured in terms of the scandals that it exposes. Its very presence is an important part of successful development. Finally, journalism more broadly is important in helping society get engaged with development. This is not just so much investigative reporting, but a role for journalism, for the media, helping societies articulate the direction in which they want to go. There are investigative elements of this. Are a few people in society benefiting most from development? Is all the growth going to the top, or is there shared prosperity? Much of this information may be contained in statistics, but some of it is best exposed or best understood by looking at what is happening to individuals, the kind of research, you might call it, the kind of investigation that investigative journalism does so well. So in assessing how development is working, how the benefits are being shared, is the development sustainable? Are the natural resources being destroyed? These are all aspects of successful, sustainable, and equitable development that investigative journalism exposes. Communities with a more active press grow better, have better economic performance. And the economic performance typically winds up being shared better because everybody can see how it's being shared. Finally, investigative journalism is absolutely essential because it really is part of the enforcement mechanism because it exposes the problems, which then governments have to enforce the laws. And it provides the kind of checks against the abuses that would otherwise occur. One has to understand that because investigative reporting, investigative journalism is so important, and because it exposes wrongdoing on the part of government, the private sector, there's going to be resistance. There's going to be opposition. There are going to be attempts to make its life more difficult. I mean, obviously, people engaged in these kind of wrongdoings aren't going to want there to be a lack of transparency, and they resent, oppose the kind of openness that investigative journalism demands and brings about. There are a whole variety of tools that though the opposition uses. In some countries they use libel laws, where they say if you accuse somebody of something that defames them, they can be sued. In other cases, they do things as simple as licensing requirements and not giving them a license. In other cases, it's violence, thugs that will break up the newspaper. I think that one of the ways of providing some protection for journalism is the international community should make it clear how important media investigative journalism is. The difficulty that investigative journalism, as important as it is, has today is that it is what economists call a public good. That is to say, everybody benefits from it. But because everybody benefits from it, there's a tendency of no one wanting to support it. Like all public goods, there is an under-provision privately. My own feeling is that governments ought to provide support, but in these days of budget austerity, it's going to be very difficult to get governments, and governments are not always enthusiastic about supporting somebody who might go on and point out failings that they have. So this is a really kind of area where private support is going to be absolutely essential. There is really no alternative, and it's a key part of making our democracy work. Together with civil society, active citizenry, it is an essential part of a well-functioning democracy.